shall we move on with the teams presenting, introducing themselves?
Okay, so I'm the first speaker of the team proposition. My name is Domenica Pastor and I will do the reply.
Second speaker?
Simona Mero.
Mero?
Sì.
All right.
Mero con la
Third speaker?
Maria Paola Stigliato.
Thank you. And now for the opposition house.
Lucrezia Tamagno.
Lucrezia Tamagno. Second speaker?
Mariano Laluzzi.
Yes, third speaker?
Asia Massucco.
Okay, reply speech.
Mariano Laluzzi.
Very well. I will now read the motion once again. This House proposes a strong reduction of the copyright duration into slide. Actually, copyright extends for 70 years after the owner's death. Is everyone ready? Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Domenica, you may have the floor.
Okay, speaking in 3, 2, 1, go. Hello everybody, I'm Domenica and I'm the first speaker of the team proposition, and today we're going to discuss the motion in favor. This House proposes a strong reduction of the copyright duration. First of all, I'd like to introduce my team dealing with the team outline. As the first speaker, I'm going to deal with the policy, and I'm going to deal also with the ethical issues related to the question of today. And secondly, Simona, the second speaker, is going to talk about the socio-economical issue related to the topic, while Maria Paola is going to recap all our points of strength. Now I'd like to move on to my argumentation. Less is more, less is better. That is what we believe about the policy of copyright reduction, of copyright duration. Nowadays, we know that copyright lasts for about 70 years after the artist that is involved death. And we know that that time is too long. In our opinion, we would need only 20 years after the person's death in order to guarantee an equal and equitable way of sustaining his art and his intellectual property. We think that 20 years is the right mean to copyright. 70 years as it is nowadays after the death, so we need to remember that a person might have done something when he was 20 and he might have lived till 100 years. So after 70 years, that would be half, more than a century that would have passed before the copyright ended. So that is too much time to spend on copyright. It's not the right time in our opinion. So that is how we would like to introduce our policy.
Point of information. Don't you think if the copyright lasts such a short time after the owner's death, it could be an incentive to murder the copyright holder in order to be able to use their intellectual property?
Okay, thank you. As I said before, thanks for your question. As I said before, we think that 20 years' time is the right time to guarantee the protection of the intellectual property of the artist, because as we know, generational change is very fast as it is in nowadays society. So we think that in 70 years that would have passed so many generations and the intellectual property would have not been so damaged as you said before. So now I'd like to move on with my argumentation. Why do we want to reduct the copyright duration? First of all, we must remember that we do not want to ban, so we value actually copyright duration. But we only think that the time is too long, and the time actually could be a slowdown in the economy and the fruition of the product itself. So we think that with a shorter time, the intellectual property of every artist would be would be more valued, would be more easy to export and to share with others without actually damaging one's right and one's property. So now I'm going to talk about the impact. What would be the impact if we actually reduce the duration of the copyright to 20 years? As I said before, we would help the process of sharing the heart of the person. And we know that today we live in a dynamic society that changes every day, and we must not forget that we cannot be bound to hold rules and hold measures that do not take account of today's dynamic world. In fact, if we keep on respecting today's duration of copyright, we will actually leave a measure that is just a static point into a dynamic society. It's something that does not enhance the way that the property is shared and valued. And we know that the whole point of people's to produce a major point of artists or people that involve production of something that is involved with copyright is to share and to deliver their message to as many people as possible. And if we set a bound, a limit to 70 years, many things cannot happen because of that limit. And we do not want that. We actually want to help artists to share their products, and we want that now, because now is
Point of
right.
information.
Yes.
Don't you think that those 20 years will still be a reduction of the freedom of expression of these artists?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Don't you think that those 20 years will still be a strong reduction in the freedom of expression of these artists?
No, we do not think, thanks for your question, we do not think that, because actually within 20 years only 1.5 generations would have passed, and we know that this is the right time to give an artist to protect his property rightfully. In fact, as I said before, we do not want to reduce all of the time, we want just a strong reduction in order to have the fruition of the product. That is all what our motion today is about. We're just here to make artists and people involved with copyright share their product more efficiently and make themselves known as much as possible, because only in this way they can have their work recognized. And we want to set rules to have their work recognized in the most ethical way possible. And reducing the time in 20 years would be the most ethical way to assure an artist to have his property protected, but also to make his property shared among the world. So that is the end of my speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Your time was 6 minutes 45 seconds. Okay, if we are all ready, we can move on to the first speech of the opposition house. Lucrezia, you will have the floor.
Starting in 3, 2, 1, now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lucrezia Tamagno, and today I'll be the first speaker of side opposition. The motion is that this House believes that a strong reduction of copyright duration should be done. So, as an opposition team, we actually think that the proposition's arguments were showing actually that reducing the copyright duration is actually not enough. In fact, as opposition team, I'm going to explain it later after my rebuttals, we want to ban the copyright. So, first of all, let's offer some rebuttals to what the first speaker of side proposition just said. Firstly, you said that the intellectual property should be valued. However, you didn't actually clearly explain why the intellectual property is so important to keep. Fine. Secondly, intellectual property, even if it's important to keep, actually nowadays the copyright does not work properly. And in fact, a lot, for example, with those remits, and there are a lot of technologies that you can just simply change a note, and that is not copyright anymore. So, then you said also about the freedom of artists. You said that then you talk about the work that can be that cannot be recognized without a copyright. Well, that's not true. Actually, also the work without the copyright can be easily recognized, and also you as the owner and the creator of that piece of art, you can be very healthy for what you've done without having a copyright on your song or on your painting or wherever. And then again, we think that the copyright could exist, could be not banned if it doesn't deny the freedom expression of artists. But as I'm going to show you in the first argument, it does. So, as a first speaker, I'm going to delve into the first arguments of opposition term, which is firstly freedom of artists' expression, and secondly, abuse of copyright by big corporations system against artists. And finally, my teammate Mariano will delve into the third argument, which is the copyright doesn't work. So, first of all, let's move to my first argument of side opposition. Nowadays, a lot of artists, every artist actually, is afraid that he or she could highly probably copyright pieces of art such as songs or music, images, characters, or even colors. So, without actually making it on purpose. For example, this is, imagine you want to make your own song, right? And you make up a short melody which is the same of one of another song, but you didn't know that song because, well, there are on the internet so many songs that you cannot all know. However, then you accidentally copyrighted that song without making it on purpose, I would remind that, and you are then attacked by on copyright grounds by big corporations. But dear judges, don't you think this is too much? I mean, even if the copyright duration will be strongly reduced as the proposition team as planned, there will still be the copyright itself, and there will be still deny the value of freedom of artistic expression. So everyone should feel free to compose or paint or anyway making his own piece of art without being stressed while controlling if any other song could be possible equal to what they just made. So with this argument, we basically want to state that the copyright system is an oppressive system that denies the freedom of expression that all artists should deserve. Now, let's move to our second.
Don't you think that copyright actually protects the product and makes people more free about sharing that product?
But as I said, actually nowadays the copyright, and actually my teammate Mariano will delve more into this argument, actually copyright does not properly work because, as I said, there are so many technologies and we can always remix a song, and then that the owners of the song cannot be sure that that his or her song will not be copyrighted because the copyright does not work properly. So I hope I've answered your question. Now let's move to our second argument. The copyright system is actually often abused, especially against smaller creators. This can lead to consequences that are extremely detrimental for these small creators, as they have no means of fighting against the big corporations. That might be, for example, suing them or stripping them of revenue over the smallest infringement, and very often they are hit with copyright strikes, even when the use falls under fair use. So this shows us just how flawed, how fragile the misuse the copyright is, the copyright system is, and we cannot stand for this injustice. And then we need also to protect the artist's freedom of choice, as I said before in my first argument, as well as we know, because there are these artists, there are too many cases of this system being abused to damage the small artists. And nowadays, content and also art are prevalent forms of expression. And well, we cannot allow such an unfair system to limit what they can or cannot create. Therefore, the side opposition is barely banning this copyright system for three arguments. First of all, for two arguments, and the third argument will be dealt by Mariano. First argument, the freedom of artistic expression, since nowadays, especially small creators could be attacked by bigger corporations because they abuse the copyright system, but then small creators cannot fight against the big corporations since they don't have this so much power. And then because the artists should be free to compose or to paint or to make the art without being stressed of all this copyright that actually will not work, as Mariano will say. So for all these arguments, we believe that the copyright reduction is not necessary, is not enough. We should ban copyright. So I finished.
Okay, thank you very much. Lucrezia, your time was 7 minutes 40.
What's the second? 7, I think?
7:40.
Right, so if everyone's ready, we can move on to the second speech of the proposition house. Simona, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Speaking 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, good evening everybody. I'm Simona, the second speaker, and as the first speaker of my team was seen before, I was going to deal with the socio-economical issues. But before doing it, before starting with my argumentation, I would like to refute some of the things that the previous speaker has said. The previous speaker said that the copyright system is an unfair system because it doesn't protect small creators. And so big corporations can do whatever they want because of this right. But if this was right, why every single artist would be so stressed about having the copyright? If it's so unnecessary, if small creators doesn't need it, why they claim to have it? It's no sense. They want it because they know that only copyright can protect their work. And so even copyright can just enhancing their freedom of expression, their freedom of creating or music, of expressing themselves the way they want, so by music, by images, by wherever they can do and they're able to do. But now let's move on to my argumentation. I want to say that we know that copyright is a good way to protect others' work, but the actual duration is too long, and that's why we want to reduce it to, as my first speaker was saying, to 20 years, because it's a way to protect it and to protect it the right way, because it's
For
not
information.
Yeah?
Why do you think it's so important to protect intellectual property?
Sorry, can you
Why do you think it's so important to protect intellectual property?
Well, it's important to protect intellectual property, as I said before, because they can share it, they can share what they can do, and they can show the world their abilities, their work, so wherever they can do. But, as I was saying before, the duration, the actual duration, is too long, and so that's why we want to reduce it. But we also want to say that actually paying for the copyright, if we want to put some music at a party, we got, for example, to BCI. This is an institution that guarantees the protection of the author's work. And this is a tremendous impact on the economy, also for family. If there is a party twice a month, the amount of the price of the CI would be too high. And so that's also why we want to reduce it, so that people can afford it, and this copyright cannot last for so much time. Yes.
Don't you think at this point it would be better for people to save money by simply eliminating copyright and therefore saving their money for it?
Thank you for your question. That is a good point. But if we definite ban, copyright, who's going to protect the other intellectual property? No one and nothing. And so everyone can do whatever they want with the other's work, saying that, oh no, I did the song, but actually you didn't do that song, or you didn't took that photo. So you say that it's okay, you save money, but in concrete, you do not protect your work, you do nothing, you just save money, but at the end of fame, and wherever can come from your work wouldn't be protected and wouldn't also be affirmed. No one will know that you did that work, no one will know you, but will know other people that said that the work was yours, but actually it wasn't. Then I want also to say that by reducing the duration of copyright, if for example we want to make a movie, producer can choose every single song they want, and this will both beneficial the producers and so the movie itself, but also the singers of the song, because we all know that the main
Point of information. How can you say that they can choose whatever songs they want if some songs are still going to be copyrighted in your world?
Okay, I'm talking about when the time of copyright is ending. We said that we want to reduce it to 20 years, so I'm talking about hypothetically if we do it, and that's exactly what we want to do. If we do it, producers can choose every song they want, and by choosing every single song that they want, this will be very beneficial, both as I was saying, for the film, for the movie, for the producers, for the actors, so for all the people who work at that movie, but also for the singers that perform that song. And we all know that singers, the most income of singers are the copies that they sell. And if they sell more copies, by having their song into movie, this will be also beneficial. Now, thank you for your argumentation. This will be beneficial for them, and so that's why we want also to ban the copyright, because it's for the sales, for the income of the songs that they want. It's not so. It's amazing that everyone can choose all the songs that they want, and to conclude my argumentation, I want just to repeat that that reducing the duration of the copyright will be incredibly beneficial for the society, will be incredibly beneficial based on the economical point of view, and so for also the freedom and the ability of singers and for photographers and for every single field where there's copyright to protect their work, to share their work, and to keep on doing their work, something that cannot be done if we decide to ban, as the other team is proposing, the copyright, definitely, without having their work recognized and without know who did that work. So having no originality and no property, and making the work of someone that has talent unrecognized. So thank you for your attention. It's the end of my speech.
Okay, thank you very much. Your time was 6 minutes 45. Okay, so we move on. Time for the second speech of the House Opposition, Maria.
Thank you. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Now, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Mariano Laduzzi for side Opposition, and in my speech I will be showing you why, I will be showing you our third argument about why we oppose the idea of simply reducing the duration of the current copyright laws and instead prefer the idea of completely abolishing the whole copyright system. My third argument in particular is going to be about how the copyright system has been created with the idea of protecting the intellectual property of people who create certain pieces of art, but actually in the status quo it is ultimately unable to do that because many people take advantage of it. However, before I begin with that, I would like to rebut many of the things that have been said so far by said proposition. Starting with going back to one of the points of information that we asked, which was left mostly unanswered, and which I want to expand upon a little bit, and then actually responding to some of their claims. So, that point of information. The point of information was about how their system could actually create an incentive to murder people. So what we mean by that is that if we only wait 20 years after the copyright holder's death before that copyright expires, then it means that the people who wanted to use that copyrighted piece of art when it was created will still be alive by the time that that copyright is expired if the copyright holder dies soon enough for them. Therefore, this, we believe, could create potentially an incentive to murder people in order to be able to utilize their copyrighted work. And however, this isn't necessarily such a strong argument. This is just one of the problems that their policy would add on top of what the copyright system already has, because it's full of flaws and issues which we have pointed out in our speeches and which we are going to keep on pointing out throughout my third argument. However, now we'll get into the rebuttal of exactly what has been said by side proposition. So there were many points that they brought. For example, the idea of freedom of expression. They believe that 70 years is holding the creativity of artists back, and we agree with that. But we believe that it's not the 70 years that are holding back our creativity, but it's the copyright system as a whole. We believe that artists should be free to create whatever they feel like in their mind, regardless of whoever has potentially thought of it before them. Then they also stated that they still want to keep the copyright system because they believe that it's important that people's work is copyrighted and protected. We challenge this by asking them why it's so important to keep the copyright system, to have this work protected, and the only reply that we got on this regard was the idea that that the copyright system allows people to share their creative work and thus gives them more creative freedom. But this is simply not true. We can share whatever we create regardless of whether or not we copyright that work. If this was not the case, then royalty-free music would not exist. However, it does. So in the status quo, we can already share things regardless of whether or not they are copyrighted. So we don't believe that to be an issue. Then they also stated that there's the risk that everyone will be able to do whatever they want with other people's work if there is no copyright. However, we want to show that this already happens in the status quo with the copyright system, which is something that I'm going to delve into in my argument with a couple of examples. And lastly, they also stated that if we don't have the copyright system, then we're not going to be able to know who created certain pieces of art. But once again, we believe that that's not the case. We can once again go back to the idea of copyright-free music, royalty-free music. That already exists, that doesn't have any copyright, and yet we still know who made it. We live on the internet, we have information about everything and whoever made that everything is. So this is once again not an issue on our side of the house. So I will now get to our third and final argument. So when we say that the copyright system doesn't work, above everything that we've already said in our first argument, we mean that it doesn't let people actually protect the work that they created. So even if we believe intellectual property to be an important value, which we don't, the copyright system is still unable to protect it. And we have a couple of examples to support this idea. The older example is of when the Italian singer Urbano actually sued Michael Jackson on the grounds that he believed that Michael Jackson had copied one of his songs to create one of his very famous hits. Then after the trial, it was shown that they both took inspiration from a much older folk song of which the copyright had already expired. So neither of them really had any right to hold the intellectual property of that song, since they both took inspiration from an older folk song. Then, to bring out a better, even more recent example, we can talk about the Dua Lipa versus Arkansas Sound System lawsuit, which happened fairly recently, and in which the latter, so Arkansas Sound System, sued Dua Lipa over her song Levitating, arguing that she had copied their melody and sound from one of their most famous songs. Now, what hadn't been brought in court in this case, but that many legal experts have actually pointed out, is that when you look at all of the evidence, it's much more likely that both of the artists actually took inspiration from an older song made by hip-hop band Outkast a few decades prior. And in this case, it's even more baffling because the song by Outkast was still under copyright. It was still protected by copyright, and yet another artist, in this case Arkansas Sound System, claimed that sound to be theirs and used that to try and sue another artist. Just a second. To sue another artist. I'll take your POI.
Okay, so you have talked about the Dua Lipa case,
Yes.
but copyright actually saved her, so maybe copyright is a good thing. And why are you trying to ban it?
We want to ban it because the copyright system does not allow the freedom of expression of artists. After all, if every artist has to be concerned about whether or not someone before them has created the same progression of notes that they had in their mind, even though they invented it on the spot and they'd never heard that other song before, then they're not going to be able to express themselves freely. And we believe in the value of freedom of expression above the value of the possession of art, because we believe that art is ultimately an intangible thing that is very important to the identity and culture of people, and that therefore no one should be able to put their hand on it and say, I own this piece of art. Art is free for everybody. That is what we believe in on side opposition. Thank you, that's the end of my speech.
Okay, thank you very much. 8 minutes.
Sorry,
Sorry.
should I ask?
Yes,
or
please.
do we-
It would be a good idea.
How much was the time?
8 minutes.
Sorry, but they are the children. I asked them to move, but I don't know.
Okay, if it's okay for you, we can
It's alright.
move on after starting.
Yeah, it's alright.
Okay. Maria Paula, are you ready?
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
moment. Okay, so speaking in 3, 2, 1, now. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maria Paula, and today I'm here as the third speaker of my team Flyers, who are in favor of the motion of today, in order to say that the copyright duration has only to be reduced and not banned at all. So I'm here also to highlight some of the points of strength of our argumentation, and also to point out some of the other team's flaws during their argumentation. First of all, I want to rebuttal some of the things that they have said during their two speeches. Okay, so I want to start by the Dua Lipa case. Okay, I don't know if everyone knows it, but actually Levitating, the song that they mentioned, was leaked. And the only way and Dua Lipa has not lost all of their effort and all of her money because of copyright, because of the protection that she had on her music. Moreover, I want also to talk about our policy again, since we do not think that banning something is good for our society, for our economy, since every banning is an economic loss. Every banning may lead to prohibitionism, and we don't want it. Moreover, if you ban something, don't you think that there are other ways to escape the rule? I don't know how to say it better. Moreover, you also said that intellectual property, not in this specific words, but you actually said that intellectual property is not guaranteed and is not protected by copyright, but we all know that that's the goal, that's the aim of copyright, and copyright exists as existed for... Yeah.
What does it matter if that's a goal of copyright if ultimately it's not being obtained by copyright?
Okay, thank you so much for your kind question. Okay, so I just want to say that there are not enough evidence that shows that copyright doesn't work and that copyright is a thing that we have to ban. Moreover, as I was saying before, I want to recap our policy with 3 simple questions. Why, when, and how? How we start with the simplest one, so when? Right now, we can reduce the duration of copyright. Indeed, we want to save money through our policy and protect also the artists, because as we said, we have also proposed a reduction of the price that everyone has to pay for copyright. Then I will answer to how, and this is quite obvious. We want to reduce the current time from 70 years to 20 years, because we want to keep our society dynamic, and we want that every artist has to see his value recognized throughout the years, or maybe also his family has to be recognized the powerful and good actions of their death. Okay. So, and then the last point is why? Why we have to approve our policy? Why we have to just reduce the copyright duration and not to ban it? Because let's be honest, banning it will be insane, will be useless from so many points of view. Indeed, they did not talk about a real impact on our society. Okay, so...
Point of information.
No, thank you. I would like to go on. So, we want to preserve the identity and the authenticity of a product. Moreover, they also talked about copyright, a certain type of copyright, when an artist unintentionally copies another artist's product. But we all know that in many cases this copy is intentional, and that everyone can hide himself behind the excuse that it was unintentional, so it has no point to exist and to be a valid point of argumentation.
Point of information.
No, thank you. I would still like to go on. Moreover, you have talked about 3 main points. Freedom of expression, which was not brought up by us firstly, as you said, but it is not a problem because we agree that every artist has to be free of expressing himself, but it doesn't mean that he has to limit and to damage another artist's property, intellectual property, as we said before. Then you talked about the abuse of copyright, which can be True, but the cases are so low and we can make an exception, always a rule. And we proved you why you were maybe wrong about this point with the case of Dua Lipa. Okay, this was an abuse of copyright in your opinion, but copyright is what saved her career and the debut of her album, so it does not make sense. No, thank you, I'm still like to go on. And the third point that you analyzed was copyright doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Why we all concentrate on this point? Why we don't think about all of the careers as Dua Lipa one or other artists have saved copyright and how much important it is for artists to get this right. Indeed, as my colleagues, the other speakers of my team have said, every artist who wants to become a real one wants copyright and wants that his art is copyrighted, because nowadays actually it's the only protection that we have. Indeed, the other team has not presented us any way to protect music or art or whatever else from this copy or from other damages that can be done to the main product. Indeed, I would also like to focus our attention on injustice. They talked about injustice and how much copyright is injustice, but why they didn't even explain it better. They didn't do anything to show how injustice is. But we proved you that copyright is just fair and it's just equitable because it gives an equal treatment and fair treatment to all of the artist community. Moreover, I would also like to ask you something. So, don't you think that protecting one's artwork is a way of announcing one's freedom of expression itself, and it's not the contrary? Because you said that copyright limits the freedom of expression, but it isn't like that, because by announcing it, by recognizing the hard work of an artist, we also enhance his freedom of expression. And I will like to finish my speech just by saying that at the end of the day, because of our argumentation, that's why we have to reduce the current copyright duration and not to ban it, because it would be just an injustice and not the contrary. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Your time was 8 minutes 20. If everyone's ready, we can move on to Asia. Third speech on the opposition house. Asia.
Thank you very much. I will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and esteemed judges. My name is Asia Busuko. Thank you for the floor, and today I will be the third speaker for side opposition in this debate. And I'm very sorry. And as side opposition, we would like to ban the system of copyright, as we believe it is unjust. It does not work, and when it does work, it's used it's abused, and it's unjust in the towards smaller artists. Now, I would like to start my speech by offering some rebuttal to what has been said by the third speaker of side proposition before I move on to the points of clash of this debate. Now, first off, my rebuttal. They have started by saying that the song by Dua Lipa, Levitating, was leaked and her effort wasn't lost because of copyright. Now, it might seem harsh, but we would like to ask you a question. Exactly what effort did she put if it was proved that the song was copied from an earlier song that was copied from an earlier song? That's not exactly effort. She had no right to have a copyright on that song when it was copied from someone else who had copied from someone else. In this way, copyright doesn't work. It shouldn't work like that. You have no right to claim that this is yours if it's the exact same thing that someone else did. And for this reason, if we banned copyright, this problem wouldn't surface, because if the song was copied but modified, that would be acceptable. Then they said that the ban would equal prohibitionism. Now, we are not prohibiting anything. If anything, we are giving artists their freedom of expression back. And they've also said that even if we do ban copyright, they said that there will always be a way to escape the rule. And we would like to ask you, what rule would there be if we are just banning copyright? There would be no rule anymore. Everyone would just have their freedom to be able to express themselves through their art, their music, their photography, everything they deem as art for themselves. Then they started by asking us how we would reply to the same question they answered, which were when, how, and why. Now, they've asked when, and they said that they can do it right now. So can we. We can act this ban right now as well, just as they can reduce the time that it would take for copyright to end right now. Then they asked how, and they would say that by, just a second, that by reducing, they would offer their solution, and our solution is banning. So that's how we would do it. And then they've asked why, and they said that it's to protect authenticity. Now, we believe that authenticity is not protected by copyright, because as we've said, copyright often protects songs that aren't even authentic. We want to protect the freedom, which we deem is much more important than anything else. They've also said that banning is useless. And we believe that it's very, very useful, because artists are born to be free. The whole purpose of art is freedom of expression. And if we take that away, how can we say that we are helping artists if we are stripping them of the most inner core of art itself? Then they've also said that it's impossible to create unintentional song. Now we actually have an example for this. There is a creator on YouTube called Olaf, that is a very famous creator of songs that he plays on the piano, and he has an entire collection of videos in which, while composing his songs, he accidentally discovers that he just composed a song that already exists, and he shares his experience with people all over the world to show exactly that it is possible to unintentionally create something that is very similar to what already exists. Now, they've also said that the abuse of copyright is true, but it's not that much. Actually, it is, and they've also said that we did not explain this injustice and this abuse, but actually, in our second argument, we have explained that. We have said, we have told you that smaller artists are often being attacked by bigger corporations, even when their use falls under fair use. And why they are being attacked is because they have no means of protecting themselves against the power of these big corporations. And the big corporations know it, and therefore they attack them with copyright strikes, even though they should not be doing that. So the abuse is actually very real. It happens in many cases, and not only this, but we have explained where and how it happens. Now let me get to the points of clash of this debate, but before I do that, I would like to ask side opposition if there's any POIs.
Yeah, it actually is one. So, sorry. Do you think that running away from a situation actually works better than facing the actual problem?
we are not thinking that we're running away from a situation. We are thinking that copyright is the problem, and by banning copyright, we are solving the problem. We're not running away from it by maybe reducing it or changing it in a way. We are eradicating the problem at its source. The problem is copyright, and we want to ban it. We are finding a solution that will work and protect the freedom of artists. Now, thank you for your question. I will move on to the points of clash of this debate. Now, one of the biggest points of clash was helping sharing more efficiently the work of artists. Now, side proposition has said that this will be done thanks to copyright that protects them, and it's the only way to make the original artist known. But they've also said that by having their music, for example, in a movie, they would get propelled and they will sell more discs. But why wait until the artist has been dead for 20 years or make such a legal fuss about it when we can just ban copyright and the song can be used and the artist can be propelled right now, and instead of having to wait maybe until their death. Then another big point of clash was at the beginning that of dynamic society. They have said that they want to reduce the time for copyright to expire because the society is so dynamic that copyright needs to keep up with it. Now we think that there is no way that copyright can keep up with it, especially with their point of view of it being 20 years after the death of the artist. So for this reason, we think that their policy will never work, while ours will actually allow artists to express themselves and keep up with the demand of a dynamic society. And for all of these reasons and in all of these points of clash, we believe that our model, our policy, our idea to ban copyright altogether instead of just reducing it has proved to become the more efficient and better solution in the long run, but also right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asia. The time of 7 minutes 35. Can we move on to the reply speeches? Yes. Okay. Mariano, you have the floor.
Thank you. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally come to the end of this debate. I would like to thank Side Proposition for the wonderful discussion that we've had today. However, I ultimately believe that if we analyze everything that has been said so far by both sides, there were some clear points that would make sure that the win would have to be awarded to side opposition. In order to prove why I believe that, I'm going to first analyze the values on which both sides of the house were based on and state why one or the other is more important based on what's been said so far in the debate, only to then proceed in an analysis of the worlds that are going to be on each one of the sides of the house. So, starting with the analysis of those values. So, side proposition comes to us with the value of protecting the property, the intellectual property of artists. Now, the only problem with this value is that we believe it to be ultimately unimportant, also because side proposition never clearly stated why we should try to support this value. The only theory that they put out towards that idea is that having copyright allows artists to share their music or their art in general more freely. However, we've been able to show through several examples, such as that of royalty-free music, but not only that, we've been able to show that ultimately people can share their art regardless of whether or not it is copyrighted. Therefore, there is no real basis as to why we should follow that value instead of ours. And ours is the value of freedom of expression, which we have stated to be the key principle behind art. We believe, as we stated in our third speech, that art is something that allows people to express the feelings that they have inside of them in a way that is unique to them, and therefore we believe that this is a value that we need to pursue. Now, having understood these two key values and whether or not they are important based on the evidence and reasoning that has been given so far in the debate, I'm going to go on with an analysis of the worlds that we're going to be living in. So in the case of side proposition, not much is going to change from the status quo. Yes, the copyright system will be shorter, the duration of copyright will be shorter, and therefore artists will have a little bit more freedom to express themselves. And yes, their property will still be, their intellectual property will still be protected. However, when we go back to the analysis of the values that I did previously, we understand that whilst there is a little bit of freedom of expression on their side of the house, as we'll show in just a second, that is much more prevalent in case opposition, and the only real value that they have left going for them is the value of the protection of intellectual property. But as we stated before, that value has not been shown to have a real strong reason as to why we should follow it. Then, coming to the world of opposition. The world of opposition is a world of liberty, where artists are free to express themselves in every way that they want, without any restrictions from bureaucracy and from companies that want to make as much money out of anything that any artist has ever thought of, even when it's not been thought of originally by them. In our world, people are free to express themselves, and that is the value that, based on the evidence that has been given so far in this debate, is most important to the scope of this debate. Therefore, I believe that analyzing these words and these values, the win ultimately has to go to side opposition. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariano. Your time was 4 minutes, 10 seconds. Okay. If my colleagues are ready, we can ask Domenica to take the floor.
Okay, speaking in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, so I'm now going to do the replies to this interesting debate. And I would like to move on to the point of clashes that were so relevant in both of our speech. First of all, the opposition team has focused their attention on the way that copyright limits people freedom of expression. But we clearly said that copyright does not do that, because copyright actually values people's way of thinking, way of producing music, by putting that and securing that, in order that other artists cannot claim that they created something that wasn't theirs. And we think that this is crucially important to the work of artists, because as we said before, artists' work should always be valued and always be protected, in order to make them earn from that, because we know that artists' work is what make them get by day, and we do not want to limit art to just the economical point of view, but we must remember, as you always said, by saying that small artists are limited by corporations that put copyright pressure on them. Well, we think that corporation actually can strip away artists of their intellectual property, because many little artists cannot be good enough in order to fight big corporation, because if they do not have copyright, they don't secure their product. How can they fight big corporation that just strip away the product of little artists? So we think that this is crucial, because it's also because it firstly protects one's people of free expression, as the first one of the main arguments brought up by you was that. So we think that it should be taken into consideration this point, because our view of the world, with just the right amount of time of copyright, can do many things in favor of artists, related to the point of the limiting the expression. In fact, you also said later that artists feel pressure from copyright, they cannot express themselves. But you also said later on that copyright does not work as it is. Well, you actually, this is actually controversial, because if it doesn't work, why would artists feel pressure about something that doesn't work? And we think that copyright actually works, and it will work better if we just put the right amount of time on copyright restriction. So what I want to convey is that our policy, our way of seeing the world with the right amount of copyright would only enhance people's freedom of expression, but with the key point of protecting what is of artists, by protecting the property intellectual that should never be taken for granted, because artists are what they produce, are their property intellectual, and we cannot take them away from that just by saying that another person property intellectual limits the other person property intellectual because they're just the same. We cannot say that. So that is why we should only have a word in which we reduce the time of copyright, because it does not limit the freedom of expression and actually protects the artist's work, which is the fundamental thing about today's debate. And with this, I'm going to conclude my motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Domenica, your time was 4 minutes. Congratulations to both houses.